Cheers, guys. Epics 911, welcome to the Wednesday, March 22nd, 2017 edition of VR News. Want to start with a big thank you for the overwhelmingly positive feedback and just kind of general reception of the new video offering here on the channel, the weekly gaming recap. Yeah, that was just awesome. Seemed to be really popular with a lot of you. Terrific feedback as always, and I will definitely take a lot of that under advisement, and what makes sense to include moving forward, I definitely will. That doesn't mean I'm going to tinker too much, but yeah, there were just some great ideas. Now, commitment-wise, definitely not going to overcommit like I did with the forums. And like I said, that will work itself out in the future, and we will cross that bridge when we get to it. But in the meantime, if I can get the daily news show out with one or two quick look games per week and the one weekly game recap, I'll be happy. That's certainly going to be my objective. All right, let's start with Viro Media, a tool that, according to CEO Danny Moon, is going to allow businesses to create virtual reality apps for their business quickly and efficiently. Now, the type of stuff you can do with this, they have a demo video that you can watch, and it gives a few examples. There's about 6 very different. First one, real estate, and you probably guessed it's the 360 variety, the house tour style, travel, entertainment, education, news and storytelling, and finally retail and e-commerce to round out those 6. If it kind of sounds like it's rather simplistic and there isn't anything kind of really meaty there, that's the whole point. The company wants the tool to be something that businesses without a lot of tech savvy or know-how or resources can utilize to, further market their business. And advanced features, well, they address that too. And Moon says, look, we don't yet support the photorealistic lighting and high-end physics and other tools that you might find in some game engines. You're talking Unity and Unreal, etc. They do include that. That's not what this is about. It's not what's on offer. So if it's a simple yet efficient business style application, that's what the tool is designed for. So I think that's pretty cool. They've definitely, find a place for themselves in the market with that offering. Next up, Tribeca, which is usually, one of the more serious film festivals, has only been showing virtual reality for the last couple of years. And this year, the most ever, 29 virtual reality projects up for viewing, with one thing in common. As with Tribeca, they all seem to be pretty serious. And not just serious, but soberingly serious. And here's some examples. So the author of this kind of put them into 3 categories. The first bucket being social and political content. And despite the name, it's probably one of the least intense areas of that whole chunk of 29. So there's one called The Possible Hoverboard, which looks at the creator of the Omni hoverboard. Another one called Life of Us, which is a story of, planet Earth and the history of this planet. Hallelujah, which is a VR experience of the Leonard Cohen track. So that stuff isn't too bad. Then we get into that next bucket, and stuff starts getting real sobering. So we've got The Last Goodbye, which is an interactive story of a Holocaust survivor touring a concentration camp. Serious business, absolutely. Becoming homeless, where the viewer experiences the challenges of life without a home. And then Step to the Line, which is all about life inside a maximum security prison in the United States. Wow, so that's definitely some pretty heavy stuff. Now, it does make one more veer towards relatively tame, For example, there's one called Alteration, which is a bit of a fantasy. It's the story of an AI experiment that turns out to be vampiric. And it's a sword that basically asks the people that wield it to help it find its original master. And it's based on an Indian story from the Indian subcontinent. And then you've got a bunch of others in the third bucket. Forest animals realizing their lives are endangered. Monsters under a child's bed being real in one scenario. You get the drift. There's a lot of serious, sober stuff here. And according to the author, one of the worries with that is what kind of marketing, right, does that provide for virtual reality? Because you're going to have people show up at Tribeca that are maybe industry film people, not gamers, not technology disciples, and VR may be something foreign to them, this being their first exposure. Now, I think most people are going to realize that what they're watching, say it emphasizes the somber, right? Or the depressing, or the horrible, or the unkind, whatever it is. They're going to realize, your average person is probably going to realize that that could just as easily apply to fantasy, comedy, romance, drama, whatever the other categories, right? So I don't totally buy that that's, going to paint VR in this bad light. It's certainly probably not going to be the first impression we would want somebody to have, but yeah, I don't think that's going to be detrimental. Not in the grand scheme of things anyways. What do you guys think? Next story, Sony revealing a slate of new PlayStation VR games. Now, considering they've been averaging about 1 or 2 per week, I suppose they can use the word slate for 3. So yes, 3 games for Sony PlayStation VR. Gonna get into the details of those with this upcoming second edition of the weekly recap. But yeah, we've got Farpoint, Starblood Arena to look forward to, and some other upcoming PlayStation VR games. Next story, Knott's Berry Farm installs VR Ghost Town in America's oldest theme park. Now, I think it's still up for debate. I don't know if it's officially the oldest theme park. I know they make that claim. I don't know if that claim's ever been substantiated. But let's just run with it. So apparently, they being the Knott's family, opened it up as a restaurant off their farm. And you'll see that a lot. It was one of the things my wife and I and daughter loved in Hawaii, for example, with the shrimp shacks, for example. Farmers that then have a restaurant or kiosk where you can get their produce or food, whatever they happen to be doing. So that's how the Knott's family started. Then it kind of morphed. It's close to Disneyland. You guessed it. Theme park, rides. April of last year, they started the discussions to expand on the arcade front, and now they seem to have accepted it and welcome it. So they've got this new Old West shooter. What's interesting about their technical setup is it's wireless. It doesn't seem to have anywhere near the latency of the Rift or Vive, though, according to those who've tried it. You've basically got a maximum of 16 people at once. There's 8 rooms, and each room can accommodate 2 people. So there's co-op and single player. So I guess it would be 8 to 16 at any given point in time. No backpack. So like I said, it is wireless, this solution, but the latency isn't quite as good. The game itself is basically 3 minutes in length. Each phase roughly a minute. You've got a robot shootout. Then you've got an exploding train that throws debris at you. And then you have a final boss battle to end the game with. Very much a high score style game. So something that you can try to better yourself if you do it solo, for example. And I love that formula. It was what made those first arcade games so successful. You wanted to better yourself or your buddies. And in that respect, it was one of the best social experiences you could have, even though arcade machines and arcades in general, seem to be a pretty solo thing. So very cool. and definitely hope they can pull it off. So that's at Knott's Berry Farm. So if you're heading down to California or up to California, depending on where you're coming from, maybe check out Knott's Berry Farm and that ride, especially if you're into VR. Next up, Mathematicians creating warped worlds in virtual reality. I stumbled upon this on scientificamerican.com, a science site that I very much enjoy, almost a daily, right up there with Ars Technica and some other ones, space ones. What they've done with this and why this is so cool is it allows the mathematicians to bend the rules. So with Euclidean geometry, for example, you've got lines running in parallel, but never touching. Well, within this virtual reality experience, they can say to hell with the rules, we are going to make that happen. And what it does to depth perception, sense of scale, is really, really cool. It looks trippy as hell, almost as if it was, induced somehow, but yeah, not the case, just simple geometry, but geometry that doesn't follow geometrical rules. What they're hoping that will lead to is not just the experience itself, but opening up mathematics into all kinds of new cool ways. And an example of that, pre-VR, was a fellow by the name of Bill Thurston, also a mathematician. He was able to revolutionize the study of 3D geometry. And how he did that is he would imagine himself literally being in that 3D environment. Well, now with VR, thanks to virtual reality, you don't have to imagine, you can actually put yourself there. Just really cool. Not, in 100 years, 1,000 years, would I have thought of that. Somebody did. And then when you hear the idea, you think, wow, it's so obvious. Why didn't somebody else think of that? So that's the kind of thing I just love about doing the daily VR news show. Something new every single day. Never ceases to amaze. And the last little tidbit here, guys, another virtual reality trade show. California must have a monopoly on these, and I guess with the good weather, mostly that makes sense. This one is called the Sillicon Valley VR Expo. It runs March 29th through to and including the 31st. Pretty expensive. The prices I saw ranged from about $895 for everything to about 2/3 of that if you were just going for specific venues, for example. Now, there are some game devs on site. Of course, Oculus is there. But this isn't a gaming VR conference. So what you're going to get out of this one is a lot of the third-party, non-gaming stuff that we've talked about, since launch. So yeah, if I was nearby, definitely would be going to that. Although it is a little cost prohibitive. I will say that. All right, guys, that is it for the news on this Wednesday. Looking forward to Thursday because that brings Game and Friday. And Game and Friday is always welcome. Cheers, guys.